So just to run through a little bit background of Godfrey. Yeah, so he's a full stack developer, system architect, data privacy and security expert. Yeah, he's an hands-on leader that spent way so much time behind the computer monitor, released his 10 computer engineers and software developer to develop latest weaponized malware protection and security-focused communication solution. Yeah. He also advocates for data privacy and security through technological advancement and education. Yeah. At this point, I want you all to join me to welcome Godfrey.
Jeff. It's okay. That's okay. All right. So that, I guess, is my introduction. I'll just add, I've been working in the security industry now for 14 years, and I'm really excited to share the wild world of weaponized malware with you guys, the stuff that's kind of behind the curtain. There's a couple slides we should be able to attempt to skip to kind of speed things along a little bit, but we'll kind of go through what is weaponized malware. So weaponized malware is the private industrialization of deadly and effective exploits that have been designed to simplify and reduce the technical complexity of launching a multitude of cyber kill chains against an intended target. The purpose of weaponized malware is to deploy spyware agents which can aid in a multitude of operational objectives, including espionage, surveillance, extortion, blackmail, and theft of sensitive or classified information. Many of the surveillance vendors that we'll be talking about today are commonly referred to as commercial spyware vendors, or CSVs. They advertise and sell their products like traditional armaments, where you would need to purchase a magazine of rounds that can be used with your new purchased weapon. The current state of weaponized malware in regards to mobile device surveillance has reached an all-time high. If you're sitting there and wondering, is your phone vulnerable? The answer is yes. All you need is a phone number, and within minutes, you could be the next victim or target. As an attacker, you have the ability to access the microphone, camera, emails, text messages, location services, all of your browsing history, your full application data, and so much more. The list will only become longer as I start to showcase the technical capabilities while we dive into the hidden world of covert surveillance. We must consider that most of our digital lives are on our mobile phones, and to many of us, an extension of who we are as an individual. Weaponized malware can have a profound impact on the intended target and the communities that they live in. What I find most fascinating about these tools is that they are now predominantly sold by the private sector, which now actually surpass governments in the development of similar tools required to conduct intelligence operations and cyber warfare. Commercial spyware vendors trying to make these attacks very easy for their customers. With point-and-click dashboards like the cyber operations platform you see here, they can initiate attacks against target devices, gather intelligence, and manage existing infections. So, of course, in the security world, we love our technical lingo and acronyms. So I didn't want to leave anybody behind in this presentation because it kind of builds upon the base of the knowledge of what a zero-day is. So we can kind of quickly go through it, I guess. So zero-day vulnerability is a software flaw which is unknown by the vendor and where no fix is currently available. This allows successfully infecting a target even with a fully patched and updated device or system. A zero-click attack is a term used for an exploit that can infect a device without requiring any user interaction. An example would be like receiving an iMessage or missing a phone call on WhatsApp. A one-click attack requires only a single action from the intended target. Typically, various social engineering techniques are employed to trick the intended target into opening a malicious link. Non-remote attacks, also referred to as tactical infections, allows an attacker to exploit devices in physical proximity. Malicious Wi-Fi networks and mobile base stations can be used to silently deploy a zero-click or a one-click exploit. Attackers can also exploit vulnerabilities in cellular baseband software and Bluetooth. Some leaked documents specifically now show exploits targeting voice over LTE and Wi-Fi calling, which most of us will have on our phones right now. A strategic ISP infection allows for network injection attacks deployed on an internet service provider or national internet gateway. This differs from standard mass IP surveillance, as it's basically used to silently deliver spyware instead of just watching all the packets that move through. What else we got on here? Man-in-the-middle attacks. This is an important one as well. This is where an attacker can read, modify, block, and manipulate network requests. Man-in-the-middle attacks can be used in a variety of ways, but most notably for network injection and bypassing encryption altogether. Command and control server, multiple uses. They could be used to send commands to the spyware agent. They can distribute malicious payloads. They can also be used to receive stolen data exfiltrated from devices. And spear phishing, that's a really good one, as we've all hopefully heard about. It's a serious threat to everyone, can be very difficult to detect. It normally involves sending an email or a message to an intended target from a known or a trusted sender. But in the case of weaponized malware, the message is perfectly crafted to persuade the target to execute a one-click exploit. Players. Before we get into how some of these attacks work, let's highlight some of the key players in the industry. So as we're all building up to get to the whole, so if you're here for the signal extraction, so that should be good. Many of these key players are prevalent today. These spyware vendors are collectively branded as lawful intercept companies. They claim only to sell to customers with legitimate use for surveillance ware, such as intelligence and law enforcement agencies. The reality is many of these tools are now often abused under the guise of national security, from spying on human rights activists, journalists, academics, and government officials. In recent news, Amnesty International released a report shedding light on how these tools are now being used to facilitate gender-based violence. Many of these companies have been caught selling to private organizations for corporate espionage, extortion, and intimidation. Thanks to the hard work from the EIC, or the European Investigative Collaborations Media Network, with technical assistance from Amnesty International Security Lab, we finally have a glimpse into the global spyware trade. Agnes Callamard, which is Amnesty International Secretary General, said that the Predator Files investigation shows what we have long feared. The highly invasive surveillance products are being traded on a near industrial scale and are free to operate in the shadows without oversight or any genuine accountability. It proves, yet again, that European countries and institutions have failed to effectively regulate the sale and transfer of these products. All right, first one up. It's my favorite, Intellexa Alliance. They're an evolving group of companies and brands that have been involved in developing and marketing a wide range of surveillance products, including advanced spyware, mass surveillance systems, and tactical infection platforms for targeting and intercepting nearby devices. The links between these companies are shrouded in secrecy through corporate entities. The structures between them are constantly morphing, renaming, rebranding, and evolving. The Nexa Group, which is one of the members, was created in 2012 and primarily operates from France. Specializing in mass surveillance systems, it was actually created to take over from another mass surveillance business from the French company called Armistice. The Nexa Group originally contained Nexa Technologies from France and Advanced Middle East Systems, which is a sister sales office located in Dubai. The Intellexa Group, founded in 2018 by a former Israeli army officer, is controlled by a holdings company based in Ireland. The main companies under the umbrella are Cytrox, Yspear, and Senpay, which specialize in the creation of virtual avatars for spear phishing. It is unclear if the alliance between the Nexa Group of companies and the Intellexa Group is still currently active this year. The Intellexa Alliance is best known for its Predator spyware, which targets both iOS and Android devices. It was originally created by the North Macedonian company Cytrox, which became part of the alliance in 2018. Predator is normally combined using other products that the alliance offers to increase the probability of a successful infection. Using products like Mars or Jupiter for strategic ISP infections, Spearhead, Triton, and AlphaMax is an optional add-on for tactical infections. AlphaMax for tactical infections with the optional add-on, what's the name of it? Optional add-on Epsilon to facilitate man-in-the-middle attacks against mobile devices, or AAA Automated Active Avatars, which is a platform to manage fake social media accounts and messaging application accounts, which is used to social engineer a target into opening an exploit link. The next one, NSO Group, is an Israeli cyber arms company best known for the development of Pegasus. They are well known thanks to the extensive media coverage they've received during numerous legal battles. They also made headlines when the FBI came very close to using Pegasus for domestic spying inside the United States. Early versions of Pegasus, which was first identified in 2016, used spear phishing techniques, but by 2019, the NSO group had finally upped their game and they graduated from single-click exploits to zero-click exploits, when it was found that WhatsApp was being targeted by Pegasus. Simply calling the intended target's WhatsApp number would automatically exploit and infect the device. You didn't even need to answer the call. By 2020, Pegasus shifted towards primarily using zero-click exploits and network-based attacks. These methods allowed clients to break into target phones without requiring any user interaction. Since 2020, many of the exploits used were based on vulnerabilities in iPhone's iMessage features. If Pegasus fails to compromise a device using a zero-click exploit, it can also be installed by setting up a wireless transceiver near a target device or by gaining physical access to the phone. RCS Labs is an Italian surveillance company. They've been active for over 30 years. Recently, they were acquired by Cyforgate, which is a company that provides cyber electronic warfare and intelligence to private enterprise and government and law enforcement agencies. Their spyware is named Hermit and is known for its ability to infect both Android and iOS devices. Both companies have been surrounded in controversy and have been well known to sell to authoritarian regimes. Hermit is specifically designed to infect mobile devices. It can carry out various surveillance activities, including tracking calls, accessing your messages, recording audio, and exfiltrating data from the device. Their spyware operates using a modular approach. Additional features can be downloaded as needed after the initial infection takes place. This makes it very flexible and adaptable for different surveillance needs, depending on the individual target. Hermit is often delivered via malicious links sent through SMS messages or through spear phishing attacks. The spyware has been linked to sophisticated operations that often involve collaboration with local telecommunications providers to disable data connections, forcing the victim to connect to a malicious Wi-Fi base station where it could then deliver its payload. It was also found to be embedded in legitimate carrier-branded applications. Black Cube. All right, this is more of an honorable mention. This company does not possess all the technical capabilities of those previously mentioned, but is widely recognized for its expertise in espionage services. It started as an Israeli private intelligence firm and has been involved in controversial corporate espionage, legal investigations, and intelligence gathering activities. It wasn't until recently that they were found to have an affiliation with a company called Global Technologies that offers zero-click exploits for both Android and iOS. Its most notable tool was a Bluetooth exploit called Arcleys, which is a Bluetooth zero-click tactical infection. As long as your phone has the Bluetooth drivers on it, you're instantly infected within its radius. Arcleys penetrates mobile devices without any interaction from that user. Once the device information is collected and transmitted, the agent will automatically erase itself from the target, removing all evidence that it was even there in the first place. Black Cube was reportedly hired by Harvey Weinstein to gather information on individuals, including journalists and potential accusers, in an effort to prevent stories of sexual harassment from being published. They have also been involved in numerous corporate cases where they were hired to gather intelligence on competitors, critics, and adversaries. This demonstrates the power of these tools are now slowly shifting hands from governments and moving into the private sector. Once the exclusive domain of governments, many of these tools can now be purchased and deployed by non-state actors. The consequences of this only exacerbate the ongoing struggle to protect ourselves as individuals and the organizations that we work for. In recent years, many ethical and legal questions have been raised regarding their use and have even started to earn the name mercenary spyware for hire. The March Threat Intelligence Report by Google noted they had observed 97 zero days exploited in the wild in 2023, compared to only 62 in the previous year. Many of these exploits were found to have already been incorporated into weaponized malware. Even encrypted messaging applications such as Signal can become vulnerable to data exfiltration when infected with such malware, despite their strong security protocols. The unchecked spread of these capabilities underscores the need for better regulation, stronger defenses, and heightened awareness of cybersecurity threats. Many of these exploits reported were able to run arbitrary code, extract contacts, call logs, messages, photos, web browsing history, as we mentioned earlier, as well as gather information from many different applications, including iMessage, Gmail, Signal, Threema, Viber, Facebook, WhatsApp, Telegram, and Skype. The point of this is that most of those applications utilize some sort of encryption, some sort of end-to-end encryption, right? And they're still able to actually extract that. Many of these tools attempt to gain root access, similar to jailbreaking on iOS devices. And if this approach fails, they still have a range of other attack vectors at their disposal. When combined with stealth techniques, this creates an increasingly dangerous and lethal ecosystem. So you may be wondering, how do these companies make sure their software doesn't fall into the wrong hands? The growing number of leaked documents throughout my research suggests that most commercial surveillance vendors are indifferent to whom they sell their products. While they may have started with good intentions, increased sanctions have led them to find new and creative ways to expand their operations. They've actually developed methods for handing off supporting hardware at airports or terminals. A key aspect to many CSVs is that they offload the work of setting up the attack infrastructure to their customer, allowing them to maintain plausible deniability by claiming they have no knowledge of where their software will eventually be used. This not only shields them from reputational damage, but also enables them to distance themselves from responsibility if their customers' actions, including the attack campaigns, are exposed. This technique, as you can see here, is known as Incoterm CIF, which stands for cost, insurance, and freight. All right. The advanced capabilities of weaponized malware against mobile devices may feel like an uphill battle, but there may be some hope at the end of the tunnel. Before we can learn how to protect ourselves, we first need to understand how they operate. So, first step is normally the most obvious. Select your target. To infect your target, you're going to need to know some information about them. Can you simply infect them remotely using their phone number? Do you need to execute a tactical infection, which would require physical proximity to a target? Or do you need to perform some reconnaissance to understand their behavior and the best way to infect their device? Using a remote zero-click attack is the fastest and the easiest option, but sometimes the device may not meet the requirements for the exploit. In such cases, the tactical infections are normally used. However, this approach frequently affects multiple devices in the vicinity. To confirm a successful infection, many innocent users are caught in the crossfire and have their personal information compromised while the attacker locates through the information gathered for the eventual target's device. These tools come with an arsenal of techniques to make sure they can exploit the intended target even when one or two methods may fail. The most commonly used attack vector is a zero-click exploit, meaning the target doesn't need to click on a malicious link or open the attachment. A simple missed call on apps on WhatsApp or iMessage or FaceTime, which is another vulnerable system, could be enough to trigger the infection. If this fails, a non-remote, also known as a tactical infection, will silently infect the device. Many of these exploits leverage multiple CVEs. In the 2021 Google Tag Report, they describe how threat actors leverage 5 different zero-day exploits to deliver the alien agent in charge of loading Predator. If these methods fail, they can fall back to the age-old technique of social engineering, which hopefully you guys kind of know about, but basically send us a phishing message through email, SMS, or other messaging applications. They also love to use social media. This message will normally contain a one-click exploit, and then once it's open, the device is infected. Now, an interesting note on that is most of these techniques do rely on a web browser actually being present on the device for it to work. Spyware vendors go through great lengths to make sure the final payload is very difficult to detect, reverse engineer, and protect against. Once the payload has been delivered, depending on the type of malware, it gets to work quickly activating or downloading any remaining components based on the configuration and of the device. Before the exploit is initiated, the spyware will perform some initial checks. Many of these steps make sure that a security researcher is not actively engaged in trying to extract components of the malware or analyze the device. So first thing they normally do is they make sure that the phone isn't already infected, so they're not wasting, one of their licenses. They're going to double check that the system log is not actively being monitored. They're going to perform a basic location check. They're going to abort if the locale is set to a restricted country, depending on the CSV. They're going to check if developer mode is enabled. They're going to check for root or jailbroken device. They're also going to check to see if the device is being monitored by processes like TCP dump, netstab, stuff like that. They're also going to make sure that no proxy is in use on the device, as proxies can be used to intercept encrypted traffic. And they're also going to validate if there's any additional root CAs installed on the phone, since the root CAs could be an indication security researchers are on the device trying to intercept traffic. It's my favorite slide of the day. Alien, which is a unique piece of spyware that loads the predator malware, can receive new modules to prevent the need for repeated exploitation. They come as a team, and they are offered by the Intellexa Alliance. While Alien and Predator can be used against Android and iOS, much of the information available is regarding Android exploitation. The Android agent first checks to see if it is running in a privileged address space and was launched in an independent thread. It can then start forking other processes, and by using inter-process communication, or IPC if you're an Android developer, the agent can start communicating with the Predator malware. This allows for a discrete communication system that hides itself within other legitimate system processes, and also avoids network-based indicators and avoids SE Linux restrictions. As you can see in this diagram, Alien exploits the memory space reserved for Zygote to sidestep its way into creating privileged processes inside the Android permission model. Since Zygote is the basis for starting all services and applications on the device, Alien can actually change UIDs and use other SE Linux contexts that possess different privileges since it's the parent process. This allows bypassing the majority of all security restrictions, well, not all, but the majority of security restrictions designed into that operating system. Persistence. In 2021, exiled politician Ayman Noir's iPhone was infected with not only Predator, but Pegasus as well. Analysts suggested Pegasus was the first infection using a zero-click iMessage exploit, followed by Predator an hour later via one-click exploit in WhatsApp. This agent calls a function which downloads an iOS automation payload to ensure its persistence on reboot. The automation is triggered when certain apps are opened, which include the majority of both built-in Apple applications and third-party applications. Persistence is a module installed by first checking if the battery is greater than 9%. Most of us developers don't do an update, right? Make sure that battery is good. Then it automatically downloads the JavaScript code from the C2 servers, and presumably the automation triggers the exploit, which results in auto reinstallation of the Predator malware on subsequent reboots. In 2021, Predator could only survive a reboot on iOS devices. But by April of 2022, persistence became an add-on feature for both Android and iOS, depending on the customer's requirements and how much money they have available to them. The majority of weaponized malware communicate with command and control servers. And thanks to Talos Intelligence, we have further insight into how the malware knows what information to capture on the device before being exfiltrated. In the case of Android, the spyware will look at the product manufacturer, and it'll actually just request the build props right from the device. And then, depending on the manufacturer, it will ask the C2 server for which directories and applications to start targeting, as you see here. The stolen data is then written to a temporary directory and before being exfiltrated from there. Some also use encryption too to make it a little bit harder if it's passing through your network. This one touches on that. So Pegasus has multiple communication channels. In the past, Pegasus has employed SMS as a legitimate way to receive commands from the attacker, as you can see above. So the text message looks like a legitimate password reset, but it actually contains instructions for Pegasus to update its C2 server. This functionality allows Pegasus to be updated out of band if HTTP or HTTPS is currently unavailable. This ingenious functionality allows the infection to persist even when the command and control servers have been taken down or compromised. And just kind of side note on that one. So when you look at I have a little laser pointer on here, the 9 is actually the instruction, and inside of that is actually the URL when it actually takes out the hash from that one. It's kind of interesting. So it has different instructional commands depending on the last digit of that one. Many of the exfiltration methods also run low and slow. They gather up as much information as possible and then exfiltrate it when they're ready to avoid detection. But in addition to storing information for a later date, they also have the time to conduct real-time espionage. when your device's real-time messenger where your device's microphone and camera can be enabled remotely, giving the attacker continuous access to your current surroundings. Some of the commercial spyware vendors will prevent detection by only exfiltrating data on specific intervals and making sure to use unmetered connections. Wi-Fi data is normally not monitored as closely as your SIM card data since it has no effect on your mobile internet plan. Some target devices may have agents installed or could be in a protected network, so the attackers will go to great lengths to obscure and anonymize the network traffic, making it very hard to identify the nature or source of these attacks, as seen in the predator architecture diagram. One of the main reasons exploits used by weaponized malware can sustain such long life cycles is due to the fact that the spyware goes through great lengths to make sure it's erased without leaving any trace evidence it was even there in the first place. This makes it very hard to figure out how the spyware operates and build solutions to protect from these types of attacks. Pegasus is a highly sensitive built-in self-destruct mechanism. When the software appears to be threatened or unable to communicate with its command and control servers, it will automatically self-destruct, removing all persistence mechanisms with it. Pegasus even goes as far to remove all of the libraries used for the live video and audio recording. The attacker can also send remote self-destruct commands for when the surveillance has been completed, which this functionality is important as licenses are actually based on concurrent infections, so now it allows for more potential targets. By using these methods, it makes it very difficult to attribute the attack to its originator and help maintain the operational effectiveness of the spyware. Encryption works until it doesn't. Encryption is a very important aspect in all of our lives. Many people don't even realize how many times in a day they actually interact with some form of encryption. Whether it's navigating to a website using HTTPS, connecting to a Wi-Fi network, watching Netflix, or even scarier, we'll go into that one, or making sure your private photos stay in the cloud where they belong. Some of you may have heard the phrase, encryption is rarely cracked, it's bypassed. Cracking encryption can be hard, really, really hard. So why waste computational resources when you can simply bypass it altogether? Most secure messaging applications and protocols focus on the end-to-end encryption aspect. But when dealing with weaponized malware, you really need to take a holistic approach to data security. So we're going to do just a quick run through history of mainstream encryption. So starting with PGP, or Pretty Good Privacy, was created by Philip Zimmermann. He released the open source code in 1991. But back then, the government thought these ideas were dangerous. It was a paradigm shift from ultimate control to no control. They thought the ideas were so dangerous, they considered them to be weapons. They classified cryptography as a munition. If you wrote some crypto code and you sent that to a friend in another country, it would be considered the same as selling them a Hellfire missile at today's standards. Since books are considered to be free speech, Zimmermann was able to circumvent these policies and publish his source code in a book called PGP, Source Code and Internals using MIT Press. PGP is primarily known for email encryption, but can also be used to encrypt data at rest. The problem with PGP adoption was the complexity of setup and still required the user to manage the cryptographic keys, of course, understand PKI infrastructure, and manually encrypt and decrypt messages. What's our time looking like? All right. OTR was presented in 2004 as an improvement over OpenPGP and SMIME. The protocol allowed for real-time chat-based communications. Pigeon was the first mainstream implementation of OTR encryption. This protocol had many issues and was repeatedly subject to many man-in-the-middle attacks. By 2007, many vulnerabilities were discovered, which led to the creation of the Socialist Millionaires Protocol, improving protection against man-in-the-middle attacks. OTR was the inspiration for protocols like the Signal Protocol, which allowed offline messages, and OMIMO, which provided multi-end encryption, allowing messages to be synchronized across multiple devices or clients. The Signal Protocol is the backbone of modern secure messaging systems. It started its journey in 2010 as a small startup called Whisper Systems, co-founded by Moxie Marlinspike and roboticist Stuart Anderson. where they created the first text secure and red phone application for Android. It was actually acquired in November 2011 by Twitter. In 2013, Moxie founded another company, this time called Open Whisper Systems, for the continued development of the open source text secure protocols, where he developed the axolotl ratchet with Trevor Perrin. The ratchet, named after the endangered aquatic salamander with self-healing abilities, allows for every message sent and received to use a new key, which provides forward secrecy and allows for public keys to be periodically refreshed, ensuring that even if a single session is compromised, future messages can remain secure. In November of 2015, the text secure and red phone applications were merged to become Signal for Android, which many of us use today. The following year, the axolotl ratchet was renamed to the double ratchet algorithm, and the text secure protocol became known as the Signal protocol. And this was done to avoid confusions between both the ratchet and the full actual protocol. So the protocols that we just went over primarily deal with the problem of end-to-end encryption. Many other aspects, including identity verification and storage, are left to the developers. And this is where things go wrong. The majority of application developers do not use any storage encryption at all. Mobile application developers think that Android and iOS devices are a magical black box. The fact is, most of these applications rely on the operating system for protection. When dealing with weaponized malware, if you haven't implemented any type of storage encryption, your application is vulnerable to attack. Without two-factor identification or like a password or a hardware token, it can basically, one second here. Yeah, without two-factor identification, like a password or hardware token, exploits are then created to decrypt and access this encrypted information. Here's one such exploit that has been leveraged by many surveillance vendors to access your Signal communications after a successful privilege escalation. So I did a pre-record, so we don't have any technical difficulties during this one. So right now, we have a privilege escalation. So if you're not familiar with this is Genie Motion. Thanks, man. This is Genie Motion. Of course, root privilege is installed on this. So just like how weaponized malware would attack it, most of the hard work is done. But Signal changed a few years ago. Signal used to use a passphrase you could actually have for the database. And then they slowly started moving towards using Android key store protection. But because they're now, they specialize in end-to-end encryption, why should they have to worry about the storage encryption? So they said, okay, let's just pass it on to Google, and everybody has a Google phone. So when you're looking for exploits, of course, most of the exploit brokers, I think right now it's $2.5 million for an Android zero-click and only $2 million for an iPhone zero-click on the market right now, which is kind of interesting. So as we're setting this up, can't see from here. Yeah, so as we're setting this up, we're setting up a legitimate phone number. You'll see that I keep being challenged because I did this quite a few times. So things didn't like what I was doing, but of course I am human, so I was able to pass the challenges. And I'm actually talking with my partner there, Chantel, on her phone. And so, what we're going to do is just kind of send some conversations back and forth, which I'll use on my standard phone. And then from there, we're going to be able to attack the database. So how many of you currently use Signal? Show of hands. Nice. All right. This will be good for you guys. So a lot of them just kind of showing that we only a single device. Now I had a really interesting question on this. So I'm interacting with this device. And so one of the questions that I had in the previous talk for this was, well, what if ADB is unavailable? But remember, we don't have to worry about ADB being unavailable to a computer because this exploit is just an automated payload that you would just dump onto the phone. This is me doing manual implementation of the exploits. You can kind of see it's a little bit longer of a process, but close to this. Oh yeah, this is quite interesting. So I've extracted the database, open the shared preferences. So everything in this section here, that's actually your encrypted secret in plain text right there. So the exploit that we're going to run, which is available, it's publicly available, you guys can use it. It's following these steps. Play the thing yourself, which is kind of fun. So you can see there's a single device. So there's a section here once we do a pull on the database. Let's report past the area. Yeah, so we're just running a checksum on it as well, so you can kind of see your work. Because what we're actually doing is when Signal's installed, there's a secret inside the key store that gets stored here. So you're able to actually see the checksum on that. So then what we're going to do is with this exploit, we're basically going to use this key here, and our little application is going to build another key right next to that one. So here it is here. And funny enough, this actually uses the Signal code for the decryption. So open source technology is great, but it's a double-edged sword as well too. So we should go in, graph Signal code for decryption and how to fire the key store and actually dump it in here. So we can see we're just copying and pasting into this. Yeah, the new Android Studio Logcat kind of sucks, but just trying to get it all working here for you guys. Yeah, so here's the app over here. We just launched it up. Perfect. So now what it's done is actually just create another key store, just like Signal did. And so we go in here. There was a few typos. I'm sorry. But we're going to find the new key store that was created next to it. We're going to run another checksum on it to see that we have 2 different hashes on it. It should be different to start, because of course it's another key inside of the key store. But then we're going to overwrite it with the Signal, because we're now in the same, basically in the same space. So now we should be able to see, there it is. So we basically duplicated the key store from Signal. So now in theory, we should be able to get that password, and we should be able to open this database. So from here, should just take a couple seconds to fire through, and the passphrase. And I see. So I think earlier I showed I tried to open the database and it said, hey, this isn't a database. It didn't understand or recognize what it was. So now we're going to open it up. DB browser. DB browser for encryption is the one you actually have to use. This is a mini database and 1 access. This one was a little bit tricky. You can't just hit go. So there was a guy with an excellent blog on how to do this as well too. And he actually figured out what numbers you actually needed to be able to open the sucker up, which is cool. And so yeah, you now have full access to the database. And from here, you can basically just start storing, and then eventually you just send out the secret and you send off the database and full access to all your Signal communications. But as you can see here, that's our private conversation. Yeah. All right. So I'm sure many people in this room, of course, as we know by show of hands, have a Signal. So, make sure to get those tinfoil hats ready. You already have one, I think, so you're good. So let's look into some ways that we can protect ourselves from weaponized malware. One of our developers, this guy actually right here, Anthony, shared this with me and actually the whole team a few weeks ago. The surveillance industry has always, of course, survived in a murky and shadowy world. With the thanks to an entire community of volunteers, Surveillance Watch created an interactive map that allows you to visualize the global surveillance industry. You get to browse through known targets, affiliations, subsidiaries, partners, and what's really cool is the financial backers as well too. So when you start going through this, it's a little bit scary to see what some of these companies you'd never think have been involved in, which is super cool. And it's also community driven, well executed with numerous credible sources, so you can actually cite your work. I highly recommend checking it out. And if you haven't already, definitely take a picture before I change the slide. Perfect. All right. Privacy Washing Award goes to, yeah. An interesting takeaway that I learned during my research is that having the newest device or the latest operating system has absolutely no impact on commercial spyware vendors. Google and Apple release, or at least try to release, a new version of the operating system every year, but they allow early access to beta versions months, sometimes half a year or more before general availability. And this gives plenty of time for vendors and exploit suppliers to confirm previous attack chains are still working and give them time to develop new exploits before it's actually released to the public. So there they are, jumping with joy. Exploit brokers, we only have 45 minutes, so we don't got much time, but exploit brokers sell full or partial exploit chains as a subscription model. Customers are entitled to working exploit replacements if an attack chain that they purchase fails. Exposing vulnerabilities as a security researcher is very important, but it doesn't seem to make any impact on the CSVs. All right, so armed with your new knowledge, make sure to do your research when considering a change in your security. I hear all too often privacy-based operating systems are the savior of our digital security. Some of their websites even boast that they're security focused and help Google and the Android team find numerous security vulnerabilities. But let's just take a step back for a second. Security focused and privacy focused are two very different approaches to system architecture and design. The confusion stems from the fact that privacy-focused operating systems implement many security features, but at their core, they are built to break free from the big companies tracking your every move. With weaponized malware, as we've learned, any phone using features like a web browser, SMS, GMS calling, or Bluetooth is susceptible to an attack. Users are often the weakest link in cybersecurity, so even application stores and sideloading can be harmful as human behavior is unpredictable and vulnerable to manipulation, which is just one of the methods preyed upon by commercial spyware vendors. These companies offer great alternatives to the mainstream offerings, but they are not designed against advanced threat actors with weaponized malware at their disposal. All right. This one's just kind of a funny real quick. We'll just kind of go through it. But as we've seen throughout the presentation, weaponized malware is designed to circumvent all standard practices we thought we would keep us safe. So we know strong passwords aren't going to work. They're already on your phone. We know that latest updates aren't going to work because they already have access to the latest update before it's pushed to your phone. The latest device doesn't matter. They already have access to the OS before it's released. Antivirus, as you can see, they do a very good job of making sure that they can avoid your antivirus. Not a bad thing, but they make sure they can. Encrypted messaging, as we've seen, most of it's end-to-end encryption. Nobody's really looking at the storage of the actual device that is being targeted. 2FA, MFA, right? We all want to use that. If they're on your phone, they have access to your text messages. They have access to your authenticator. They have all the information they need. Daily reboot. This used to be a really good thing to do. Now with persistence being an optional add-on, it may not be a bad thing to do, but if whatever country or private company purchased it, they can potentially circumvent that altogether. It reinfects every time you reboot. Changing SIM cards, that is one that can kind of help, but tactical infections can also break through that. Last slide, we're on the last one. There is some hope though. Apart from investing in a dedicated secure communications device, there are some solutions to keeping your personal phone safe. If you use iPhone, disable iMessage and FaceTime. The majority of exploits are actually designed for iPhone. Browse the internet. This is a really cool one. Browse the internet with an alternative browser like Firefox Focus. Firefox is a target. Chrome is a target. Safari is a target. But Firefox Focus, as an example, is not a target because it's not mainstream enough. Always use a VPN or Tor. I didn't have a chance to go into really cool tactical ISP infections with 307 redirects. Maybe they'll do another talk on that one. Install a security application that checks and warns if the device is rooted or jailbroken. And that one's really cool because they are going to normally run for root or jailbreak it before they do anything crazy on your device. So if you can detect that right away, you know there's something on there. Never click links in messages. We all still have a habit of opening links from time to time, especially if we feel it's from a trusted sender, which brings me to my favorite personal method. This is the tried and true. Factory reset your device on a quarterly basis, especially after traveling. This is a sure way to keep your device free of spyware. a really interesting fact on all of this as well is in 2019 at Larnaca International Airport, a lot of the travelers through there were pleasantly surprised with the new high-speed internet that was available. What they didn't know is between, I think it was fall of the next summer, over 9 million devices were compromised as they walked through Cyprus's main airport. Zero-click infection across the whole system. Yeah. Thank you. All right. I think we have a few minutes for questions. If anybody has anything?
On there is a lawful mode, right? That you can go to and switch on the lawful mode if you're excited. Does that help?
It does help a little bit. If you look at, I think, Citizens Lab, if you just typed in Citizens Lab lockdown mode Egypt, they actually got through that as well too. And they were it was very hard to infect it, so it does help, but they were still able to get through. And they found by sending it to Citizens Lab, and they did a full forensic on it and found out, yeah, you've been infected many times. Yeah, but it is a start in the right direction. So Apple is kind of getting there. Anybody else? Yeah.
First of all, thank you for the great presentation. My question is, in your research, have you seen any information where any of the experts have used kernel level access? So they have, even if you factory site your device, there's still possibility where it could still be in factory. And that second open-ended question is, because this is so sophisticated, again, in your research, have you seen this is more targeted towards the VID folks from the nation state actors, elite hackers?
It's a good question. So the first one on the kernel, a lot of them are kernel exploits. Factory resets actually seem to get rid of them, which is really good. I can really speak to Android. I'm not an iOS developer at all, but they're not able to persist through full factory resets, which is really cool. And your second question was, if you go back to 2019, 2020, this was really nation state stuff. As you can see with that Incoterm CIF, with all the sanctions being put onto these companies, they're basically now, they got to stay in business. And so they're now kind of reaching out and finding different ways that they can sell. So recently in the news, or maybe not recently, this is a couple of years ago actually, FinSpy, which was Finn Fisher, that was a German company. The German government used it. Our government, I believe, used it. Many governments used it, right? Well, they kind of crossed the line. We could say that, right? They started basically selling through an intermediary, and they got caught selling to sanctioned countries to try and boost their revenue. And they were caught for that. And the Germans actually arrested, which is quite interesting. So yeah, but it is now, it's like, Harvey Weinstein, right? How should he have access to this stuff? That's kind of crazy.
Thank you.
Well, yeah.
I'm just wondering, I saw your live demo of Yet.
Yep. 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 Yep.
How different would that this would look actual normal
But actually pretty easy because you just script the whole thing, right? So once you have your privilege escalation, which is what these CSVs specialize in, from there, that's just a really basic exploit on the phone. That's why I just kind of wanted to show how easy it was going through it manually. To script that would take nothing. And then from there, they would just exfiltrate that key with the rest of the package, which is quite scary. Yeah.
Okay. I think after the basement and you will wait behind that.
Yes, you can come up and ask questions for sure. Yeah,
I
definitely.
also have many questions.
That's good.
Yeah, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I actually grabbed so much, and I believe everyone as well. And on behalf of the team, your friend.
Oh,
thank
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome.